Oh, we're back.
Too funny.
Yes, no, this is really us. So I want to introduce all the people who have magically appeared in some of the seats. But first, I really want to contextualize one of those last few videos. That caller, Eve, was Beth, who later became Matt's wife. And She and I worked out that call in advance.
Oh, did you?
So, we had all met, and I thought it would be hilarious. And before you jump on me for this was before we got tons of prank callers on the show. So in a way, I regret setting up an early prank call because it kind of opened the floodgates to people thinking that it would be funny to do the same thing.
We've
maybe
had prank calls for a long time.
But you got to admit that was pretty funny. Like rewind it and watch my
She was
face.
doing apologetic, all in a row. Boom, 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 boom.
Right.
Look at the trees.
Yeah. But anyway, so we've still got Ashley Perrien with us, but we also have a number of people, a couple of whom are still regular. First we have Tracie Harris.
Hey, great to be here.
Tracie, now you were co-host for a really long time, and now you are a host.
Right.
Which basically means almost no change, but you get to control the phones.
Yes. I think I appear a little bit more often, but yeah.
So tell me about how you came to be involved with the show and some things that you remember, maybe.
Oh, gosh.
Don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I used to watch the show, and then I started calling the show. And then...
Remember?
Yeah, I called
I
when
talked to
Don...
you, and I said, hey, you're awesome. We should come down and meet us.
You did. You invited me to dinners.
Yeah, I take full credit.
Well, I had been working on the cartoon, the Atheist Eve cartoon, and then I brought several prototypes of that to the dinner and passed them around, and people gave me positive feedback, and then later ACA asked if they could host the strip on the site. So all of the Atheist Eves that have ever been done, it's not being done anymore, but they used to be on the site. I don't know if they're still there. They're on the old site, but I don't know if they made it to the renovation.
I think so.
But, you think they might? I don't know. So. I haven't checked, actually. And so then I guess I got pushed a little bit, like, why don't you join? Why don't you? Like, I'm not really a big joiner, but I started coming to more of the events and felt like I should probably just go ahead and slap down my $30 and become a member. And so I did that, and then I was invited to come and participate on the show. And I was a little bit hesitant, and I think recommended maybe I should appear with somebody else, and that would make me feel better. And so we had a guest on along with me for the first time I was on. And then after that, I think you came up to me and you were like, we have you on the schedule now. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's how I ended up on the show. It was special.
Got you roped in good.
Yeah, it was very bang, bang, bang. And I was just like, okay. And as far as, special moments, some of the recent ones, I guess, like where we didn't have any phones at all, when we had a guest on, an author who had written a book on, I guess it was on some aspect of hallucination. He was there to talk about hallucinations, but had written on something else, and we discussed that. But I was glad to have a guest on because we had 0 calls the entire show, and this was recent. So it was very cool to have the guest, I guess. That happened. Yeah. And the only other thing that comes to mind that was like, oh, that was interesting, was the call about where the person wanted to justify child rape with saying that children are corrupt and evil, that ended up hitting Memesville, and I carry that to the grave at this point because it will never die, I think.
Yeah. And I think going along with the theme of what the clip that we just watched, when somebody comes on the show, calls in and says something just really outrageously awful, it's very difficult to know if they're serious or not, and that impacts how you deal with the call, because if you think it might just be somebody trying to get a rise out of you, you don't necessarily want to give it to them. But if somebody is for real saying child rape is fine, or whatever they're saying,
Or the children are somehow responsible,
Yeah.
which was horrible. Yeah.
then you sure as hell should be outraged.
Yeah.
So
I think it was Matt's reaction is actually what caused the headlines. It was Matt, called the person a piece of shit and hung up on the call, and then that ended up on, I think it was, I want to say it was on
Post.
HuffPo
Yeah,
and
yeah.
a couple other places. And then after that, people started sending me a meme of myself and something I had said on the call. And
which is weird, right? when you get memes.
at first I was just like, yeah, that's cute, thank you for sending, and then you get like 20 in a day, and you're like, okay, thank you for sending again. And nobody knows that anyone's sending it, and then, then something happens and someone finds it and they put it on Reddit like a year later, and then you start getting it again, and you're
Right.
like, I know there's a meme. So you don't have to send me the memes anymore. FYI, I've seen it, and I remember the quote, and it's fine. No, that's sufficient.
Let's see. So when I meet people for the first time, and they have seen me on the show, which is still often a surreal experience, especially if I'm far from home or something. But one of the things that comes up from time to time is, "Hey, where's your sister?"
Yeah, people ask about Keryn.
She was as Keryn Glasser, although some years have passed, and she's now Tracie-Hawthorne. And I sort of clumsily convinced her to to hurry down to the studio today and show up. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. We still see all the time, by the way. It's just you guys who don't see each other.
Yeah, we miss her. We miss her.
What you been up to?
Well, I got married. I'm a stay-at-home mom of 2 boys, a spirited 4-year-old and a really delightful 15-month-old.
They are both full. Can confirm.
And that's my life.
You, you are one of the most enthusiastic moms I've ever seen, personally.
Thank you.
Are your kids old enough to be they've certainly the 15-month-old is not thinking about it yet, but
No, it's, I hate to say it. When I was doing the show, I had a lot of enthusiasm, and then eventually I just kind of got burned out on the show. And ever since I stopped doing it, I just don't spend a lot of time getting into arguments about God, and that includes, I don't really want to bring the subject up with my kids until I have to.
I remember I jumped in and volunteered and said, I'll indoctrinate your kids
I
for
was
you.
like, do it. I'll just shuffle that over to you. You can have it. It's come up a little bit. I had started my older son in a preschool last year that turned out to be a very religious preschool. Mm-hmm. They prayed before meals, and they made a really big deal out of Christmas and Easter. And it was a little awkward. Mm-hmm. I wasn't entirely comfortable with it. And, I try to remember as an adult, I had these kinds of religious experiences when I was a child, and it didn't scar me for the rest of my life. It didn't have a negative influence on how I turned out. And I had discussions with other people, including Mom, who had similar experiences growing up and being involved in Rainbow Girls, or and so I kept him at that preschool until the year ended, and then I switched him to a different preschool. But he'd come home singing prayers about God.
Wow.
I am also still actively practicing Judaism, and I take my boys...
Very secular Judaism.
Very secular Judaism. Although, I am actually taking them to a conservative congregation now instead of a reform one, but that's just because that's where all of their friends ended up, so...
Okay.
It's a nice place. And it is, for the most part, just, a fun social experience for him.
Right.
And once in a while, they start singing in English about God or something, and Bailey will bring it up, and I'll usually at this point just deflect it.
Well, again, you can send him my way
will
anytime.
do
I'll
that.
tell him. I'll tell him the whole deal. But you don't get in any. I mean, I know you haven't become a believer.
No.
You don't get in any, or feel particularly conflicted when the rabbi. See, okay, I'm the worst Jew. We have
That guy that stands up there,
you and I, that's the clip to take out of context. You and I were both raised secular Jewish. I had some kind of nostalgic feelings long enough to stick it out for a while in college, but then basically came to your temple a couple of times in later years and was like, well, even this tiny bit of God stuff is more than I want. What do you?
It's just a strong community with a common heritage. I don't know. I mean, I always explain to people Judaism to me is more my ethnicity than my faith. Atheism is my philosophy, is my ethnicity.
Right.
So it's like being connected to my heritage. And I mean, it has a very strong culture and even like a social culture that goes along with it. You could feel connected to silly things that just make you feel part of a family, like making Jewish jokes on the Daily Show.
That's true. I did have very warm feelings for Jon Stewart doing his old man Jewish voice.
Yes, very much.
So how did you get involved with the show, and do you remember any particularly enjoyable moments from your time on it? Do you even remember that you were?
I do. I was on the show for 4 years. I remember being in college and my older brother talking glowingly about this ACA group that he'd gotten into and this TV show that he was doing. And it wasn't streaming on the internet way back then.
That's right. Yeah.
But he told me, I guess you told me when it was on. And so a couple times while I was still living in Arizona, I called into the show, just to say hi. And then I maybe came to visit you once and you had me on as a guest. And then after I moved here, you sucked me in.
Okay.
Well, I have a fond memory of you. You more than anybody else took on the topic of death and grieving, and I think you did a really good job with that and answered a lot of great calls, and I appreciate your contribution for that.
Thank you.
I also. What? Oh, cool. I also remember like the show that you and I did together that I remember most specifically was that you and I decided to just do a show about abortion, which was normally something that we didn't touch because we were like, most atheists consider themselves pro-choice, but it's also something that's a real hot button to the few people who don't feel the same way, and so we don't take an official position in the atheist community of Austin. But I think Tracie has always said, we're not here to represent all atheists. We've just got our opinions. And we were like, you and I have very strong opinions about that topic. And we just decided to do a whole presentation on it. And it went way better than I expected, which you can
It's an important
hunt
topic.
down on YouTube.
I had a good time doing the show. I think probably one of my favorite shows, besides talking about death and dying, was the one where I also talked about the Terry Schiavo case, which was current news at the time, and I talked about the importance of getting advance directives.
Right.
If you've got loved ones around you who are not your legal next of kin, and then legal next of kin who don't necessarily subscribe to your beliefs and your choices.
Yeah, and of course you have a master's degree in social work, so these were major topics for you professionally as well as
yeah.
personally.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I mean, I just always received such great feedback from being on the show. There's actually a woman who I used to work with in hospice who now works at my grocery store, and every store she just glows over, you know. And she was atheist, and her daughter was going through being interested in, going through I guess losing her faith and becoming an atheist. And
not a phase we can say with hindsight?
Not a phase, yes. Not a phase we can say in hindsight. And she really just raved about how the show, you know, as someone who was a theist and had family going through this, learned to appreciate that you can be an atheist and still be a good person. And it opened her up to being able to accept her daughter for who she was.
Oh, that's great.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful type of feedback to get. And also, I mean, when I was working in hospice, I was on the show at the time, and, you know, occasionally my clients, my patients would see me on the show, which can get a little awkward because, you know, these are people who are facing the end of their lives, and religion and spirituality can be a very big usually is a very big issue, especially at that time. And I'd even have a lot of support from my patients. I'd occasionally have patients who were atheist or agnostic, and they would share their appreciation for.
Yeah, well, that's really nice. So we also have someone who is still a regular on the show, Don Baker.
Yeah, hey. Stop
welcome.
Knocking around.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your background with being on.
Oh, you know, I came to Austin in '97 and then started looking around for a community, you know, after college and grad school, actually, and you know, found the group, and they were doing these lecture things, and I ended up doing a lecture or two, and I think they said, oh, this guy's got something to say. He's not a complete embarrassment. Well, we'll stick him on the TV show. And so you guys saw a little clip where I was talking about memetics, which was a big thing for me at the time, and got started and tried to have a different topic every week, and I've done, you know, hundreds of them by now, and so it's been fun. It's been a good First Amendment thing. And, you know, you talked about the show earlier and why do we do it? And I think, you know, one of the things that this show does that you don't see very often is having a real dialogue between theists and atheists about religion, because they don't get to have that real dialogue in their forums. And, you know, they have to take the message, the Sunday school or whatever, and any questions are poo-pooed and these sorts of things. And we actually have an honest dialogue about it. And I think that's really one of the big things the show does.
Yeah. I think you're right, because I see a lot of atheists on YouTube these days, and many of them are doing fine jobs, but what I notice that we have that they don't necessarily have is that usually it is one or occasionally two talking heads, just having some pre-written thing that they want to say, some kind of rant that they want to deliver, and just saying their thing and telling people what other people think, which at our worst, so, I mean, sometimes we wind up like misinterpreting what other people are saying, or we wind up putting words in their mouths or unicorns in their mouths, as I remember one saying. Sorry, inside joke. But I think at our best, what the show has to offer is a real effort to make a conversation and meet halfway, and if not come to an agreement, then at least trying to understand what other people with wildly different points of view are saying, and have a fair discussion about what they actually believe, rather than what one side says the other side believes. Would you guys?
Oh yeah,
say?
Yeah.
One thing I learned through doing the show, and I still have to this day, is I learned to be very careful and precise with my language.
Absolutely.
And the words are very carefully chosen. And some of it's just by habit, and some of it is not, but yeah, having that from the debate side and knowing that people are going to misconstrue things, or they're going to read into it incorrectly if you use the wrong word or something like that. I'm careful with my word choice.
Right. Tracie, do you feel like your communication style changed or evolved in some way from being on the show for so many years?
I don't know. Not too much. I have, my degree included a lot of communication studies, and so I think I was very informed and open about communication even when I started. And so I know I took some heat for telling a call. I thought his call was not relevant. And so I was like, okay, maybe one thing I can take from that is that we will allow the callers to express their points so that I can then make a demonstration of the irrelevancy rather than just simply assert it and then not want to take the call, and then people don't understand why I would make that assessment so early on. But it's like, I think a lot of times when you've done this for a while, you get the idea of what a call is and where it can go, and immediately when you hear the person laying out their topic, you get this concept of the branches where, okay, it can go this way, this way, this way, this way, and none of those are relevant. And so when somebody else
heard
thinks,
it all before.
Yeah, and so when there's this idea that, no, wait, that caller might have, and it's like, no, believe me, I know where this could go. And so, but I do think that because there were, a number of people who didn't understand I made that assessment, that it would be important in the future to sort of go down the path with the caller, even if it takes a few minutes to kind of say, and why do you feel that this is, a good point or a relevant point?
Yeah. I guess when I think about it, one of the pitfalls of having done this for a long time is that you pretty much know a lot of the arguments in a lot of detail, but the person who's calling you and also the people who are listening haven't necessarily been listening for the full 20 years of the show.
Yeah.
And so if you just say, okay, here's what you're going to say and here's what's wrong with it, the audience can just think you're kind of an arrogant jerk, which, believe me, I read criticism that people have about me personally, and I take it seriously. And so there are ways in which getting feedback on my style has made me kind of a hopefully a gentler and more giving conversationalist in a lot of arenas.
Yeah, I think I've been on with Matt, and he's very perceptive about where a call will go. And so he would jump way ahead, many steps ahead with the caller and say, this doesn't work because of this. And I would be thinking, why are you even going there? And then after he and the caller would go back and forth a couple times, I'd be like, wow, you saved us a good 10 minutes that it would have taken me to get to this point because I did not understand that's where they were going.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt's very good at that. As far as styles go, I feel like this whole thing's been a big learning experience for me, and I'm learning and growing all the time. And I think I used to paint with maybe too broad a brush and learn not to do that. And if you bring new material, sometimes it works great, and sometimes it's a little bit of a bomb. And Matt's always happy to point out when it's a bomb, and that's okay.
Well, I mean, I've heard that. I have no experience in this, but I've heard from a lot of stand-up comedians that creating a set is sort of a give and take process with the audience, and they're going to flay you and let you know if you're doing something bad, but that is
part of the
helpful
fun.
to teaching you. We just okay. So we a few minutes ago we saw a blooper reel, basically. And I think 3 of us here have actually been in the host seat, having to make the decisions about what to do with the caller. What do you do when you think, or what did you do when you thought something might be a prank? Or how did you react or deal with it? Or did you let it influence you at all?
I honestly don't remember a whole lot of prank calls. I mean,
you were in the early days where everything was great.
I do, and I was on with you.
Yeah, I mean there were a few, but I don't know. I guess I brushed them off as quickly as I tried to.
Yeah.
As soon as you notice a prank, okay, click, and our next caller is John on line 3.
Right.
I didn't try and give him.
Yeah, I remember watching you. You didn't give them very much attention, and that may have been frustrating for the prank callers. Maybe.
I hope so.
You had one or two that
I
thought
may
you were
have
really
given
hot.
them too much attention, and that's why they like calling me.
Oh.
To this day, I'm not sure if that Scottish guy, Hamish,
Yeah. I was just thinking of that.
real or not.
Because you were asking
But
how.
I am told that I'm the only one who still gives him airtime because I think he's fun.
It depends on the person, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like there, in one of the clips, obviously I entertained a prank call and had a conversation with the clip with
Right,
Phil Ferguson.
yeah.
So I understood that this person, Phil's just like, I don't think that's a real call. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not a real call. But it's funny. I mean, it had a little bit of levity to the show. It was kind of a wacky take on some, like the person was, even though he was joking, he's saying there's this humorous spin that you can put on this religious restriction in a way that makes it, this would enhance your sexuality because you'd have to get more creative. And it's like, well, this is kind of funny. So we pursued that for a minute or two and then we let him go. But a lot of times that, if it's just someone calling to scream or insult or be whack, then just hang up on them. With Hamish, the thing that I did was he was on the line at the beginning of the calls, like before the show started. Hamish was on there and identified, and how I handled that was I kept him on the line like the entire show, and then I ended the show, and he was the last caller, and we did not take the call, and I announced that I was not taking the call, that it was Hamish, and he had been on for the entire show.
Burn.
People loved it.
I mean,
I got several thank yous on the blog. So, yeah.
Yeah, actually, one of the clips that came up, I recognized as a guy named, and I'm just going to give his prank name because I know his real name and location. I'm not going to say it. He called himself Matt from Oslo.
Yeah, there was a couple.
He would call over and over again, and sometimes he would act like a straight-up creationist, and sometimes he would yell obscenities or, say, Matt is a so-and-so, and finally, I just said to him, look, man, you keep calling. What do you get out of this? And also, I hear you're a gamer. Me too. What games do you like? And I just engaged him in conversation for a while. And to my surprise, he got in touch on Twitter and responded when I trying to be kind to him. And we wound up chatting back and forth, which is how I learned his real name and location over a long period of time. And he was indeed a 16-year-old with some social weirdness. And I eventually stopped talking to him, but he didn't call the show so much anymore, so It was a success in that sense.
I think I find it a little bothersome when people start to abuse the show like that. And that's what, when we get these, I think Jen calls them frequent flyers, people that start calling a bit too much. And that's when I start to get the red flag that this person may not be an actual,
lonely or
personality.
Right. Because by and large, I mean, some of the people actually think they're doing us a favor because they're entertaining and interesting. Yeah. And I think almost without exception, they are not. And
they have too high of an opinion of themselves.
Yeah. And if we manage to get something funny or entertaining out of it, it's because of how we're handling it as hosts that people find it enjoyable and not because of...
Well, like the blooper, now you can tell your friends you got on the show.
Yeah, that was great.
No need to call anymore.
Really
You've done it.
Yeah. But, I mean, partly a reason why all of us do this show is because we enjoy discussion, the debate, the
honest
thinking.
Conversation.
Yeah, the having this in-depth conversation, which you don't normally get during the day. And so having that, even if it's with a prank caller, as long as they're making some kind of valid point, even if it may not
valid, but
even if it may not be entirely serious, it's still fun to explore the avenue of ridiculousness, for instance. It can still be enjoyable, even if it's not entirely truthful, I guess. Or
yeah, I'm just also afraid that it cheapens the experience of having these conversations if people are always second guessing is this guy serious, or why are you falling for this? And in that sense, I really don't like prank callers. They make the show.
Yeah, I certainly
worse.
wouldn't encourage it.
Yeah,
No,
but I don't think we've ever really had.
Yeah.
I don't think we've really had that enough callers really to make it a big problem.
It's not that it's a lot of pranks.
and goes.
It's that you get a pranker who then starts to abuse it, and they will start to call all the time.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, okay, this person has to stop doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can sure think of a couple of people who I recognize on site and say, hey, hang up on this guy. I don't want to talk to him.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, so we have more clips to run.
You have a caller, though.
I thought we had a call.
Oh, shoot.
Well, wait, it's not
Where'd he go?
showing.
Damn it.
We don't see it, though.
Oh, no.
No, it's okay. The studio said he was on.
Reminded me.
Oh, he
earlier.
dropped.
Nope, his light's not on.
Okay, you can call.
I'm sorry. We had Martin Wagner on the phone for a little while.
Was I able to get
Martin and Ashley were
Maybe they
host
can
and
get it
co-hosts.
back.
They were the troopers for several
right.
years.
Yeah, for a good long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those were big shoes to fill. You know,
Right.
we went to the rotation and I think that was a big thing for us and a big benefit for our audience. We had different voices and different combinations of folks, different perspectives and interests and
Different styles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
styles.
Yeah.
For
I
sure.
loved it. Like, I loved watching Jeff D's shows, and he'd always be saying something like, you know, when you're a benevolent creator that also believes that you deserve to burn in hell forever, and then he'd say, "How dare you?" And I'm just like,
Everybody
boy,
remembers.
I would never be that
There's a whole fan base
confrontational.
that just love those explosions.
I
Yeah.
always really took it to heart that, you know, the point of the show was to promote positive atheism.
You and him were kind of the spec.
We were the
You were the bookends. So,
Right.
And I always wanted to, you know, I wanted to be the face of you can be an atheist and be an optimist and be a good person and you know, be enthusiastic and I
Fun and non-confrontational and all these good things, right? Right.
Sorry.
would have someone call into the show and say, "Why do you like to eat babies and bite the heads off of chickens?" And I'd say, "Well, actually, I'm a vegan." And I love
Those
everybody.
asparagus spears, watch out for those.
we have tofu babies.
Well, if Martin doesn't manage to call back today, and I hope he does, but I will nag him to call into the regular show sometime because, you know, Martin's a good friend.
He got robbed.
yeah.
He got robbed.
Yeah, he's still. You know, we're friends on Facebook, and I follow him on Twitter, and he is just as entertaining as he always has been, just not on TV right now. You want to roll another clip, guys?
They've been good so far.
5 minutes.
What?
That's fine. Yeah, do it.
Okay. Do it.
Go.